We continue now at the top of Daf Mem Tesam and Beis in Meseches Bava Kamma. This is Bava Kamma Daf 49b. On the previous summit, the Gemara was discussing the halacha that let's say a person strikes a woman and causes a miscarriage. So generally the halacha is that the demei valdus, the value of the offspring, that goes to the husband. But let's say you have a situation where the husband subsequently he dies and he has no heirs. Let's say he's a convert, or let's say he was a freed slave, so he has no heirs. In that situation, the assailant, the person who caused the miscarriage, is not going to have to pay anything because there's no husband to receive the money, and the husband has no heirs, and the payment does not go to the wife. And Rabbah said on the previous summit that that is only true if at the moment the person struck the woman, she was married at that time, so the husband is really entitled to that payment of the value of the vlad, and then the husband dies and there's no heirs to the husband. That's when we say that the person doesn't have to pay any money. But let's say you have a situation where the husband dies first, and so now the woman is not married at all, and then he strikes her and he causes the miscarriage. So in that situation, says Rabbah, the person does have to pay the demei valdus, and that would actually go to the woman. And the Gemara had asked a question from a Braisa on Rabbah, and the Gemara is now in the middle of giving a second answer to that Braisa. And the Gemara says, V'tani Zochsa, that actually what it should say in the Braisa is not Zocha, not that the person, the assailant, is Zocha and he doesn't have to pay, but actually on the contrary, Zochsa, she actually does get it, meaning to say in a situation, exactly like Rabbah said, in a situation where the husband died first, and then he strikes her, so then the Braisa really means to say Zochsa, the payment actually does go to her, and that would be in line with Rabbah. And the Gemara continues, Lema ketanoi, let us suggest that this is actually a machlokas tanoim. Again, in this very case, let's say you have a situation where the woman is no longer married, and at that point in time she is struck. Does she get the money or not? Let us suggest that's a machlokas tanoim. The Braisa says, Bas Yisrael shenisis lager, if you have a Jewish woman that's married to a ger, v'nis abra mimenu, and she becomes pregnant from the ger, v'chaval ba b'chay hager, now if the injury happens while the ger is alive, so no sin to may valdus lager. So then again, the payment for the vlad, the payment for the offspring, it goes to the ger because it goes to the husband. But la'achar misas hager, but let's say this happens after the death of the ger, so tani chada chayiv, tani chada pater, so there's one brisa that actually says chayiv, the person actually does need to pay, and the other brisa says that the person is actually pater, and so therefore we should say, my lav is it not, tanoi ninu, that this is actually a machlokas tanoi, meaning to say, this is exactly the situation in this case. The injury happened after the ger died, and you have a machlokas within two brises. The machlokas is there a payment to the wife, or is there no payment to the wife? That's why one brisa says chayiv, and one brisa says pater. And the Gemara says, l'Rabba, according to Rabbah, again, Rabbah is the one who said that indeed the person is chayiv to pay the wife, so vadai tanoi, it is certainly going to be a machlokas tanoim, meaning to say he's going to follow the brisa that says chayiv, the payment is made to her, and the other brisa disagrees with Rabbah, and the brisa says that no payment is made whatsoever. As Rashi explains, l'Rabba vadai al karchach mukei lemilse ketanoi. Rabbah has to say that what's going on over here is a machlokas tanoim in terms of what he said. Dehu amar chayiv, because Rabbah would say in this case that the person is chayiv to pay because he'd be chayiv to pay the wife. V'had tani pater, and the brisa which says pater, lo matzi muki lekavase. It's not possible to say pater according to Rabbah because there is no scenario of pater. And therefore he has to say that I'm going to hold like the Tana that says chayiv. But again, if all of this happens after the death of the ger, according to Rabbah himself, certainly there would be a payment to the woman, and there is a brisa here that disagrees with Rabbah. And that's what the Gemara says according to Rabbah. But the Gemara says Elul Rav Chisda, but according to Rav Chisda, again, Rav Chisda disagreed with Rabbah, and Rav Chisda said that even in a situation where all of this happens after the ger dies, still the woman is not going to collect the payment. According to Rav Chisda, still we're going to say that the assailant is exempt from paying for the value of the vlad. So the Gemara is now saying, according to Rav Chisda, mi lema tanoihi, do we have to say it's a machlokas tanoim? We know obviously the brisa that says pater can follow Rav Chisda, but the question is, what about the brisa that says chayiv? As Rashi says, El Rav Chisda, mi lema mimi boy leilo ukme milsa bepluksa ketanoi. Does he have to say that there's a Tana that disagrees with him? Ulemeimar, does he have to say another amri ketana de pater, that I hold like the brisa which said pater? Or maybe he'll be able to answer that brisa which says chayiv b'milsa achrisi in some other way, to lo tikshile, that it shouldn't be a question. Again, there's this brisa that's saying that if the injury happens after the husband dies, apparently there is a payment. How does Rav Chisda reconcile that brisa? And the Gemara answers, lo kash, it's not difficult. Rav Chisda does not have to say that it's a machlokas tanoim. Harabonon harav Shimon Gamliel, because what he could answer is one brisa is the Rabbanon, and one brisa is Rav Shimon Gamliel. And Rashi explains, Lokash is not difficult. Kolomar, what the Gemara means to say is, Amar Loch Rav Chisda can say to you, Tarvayu Tanoi Kivasi Kaimi, both brises actually follow me. The Dmei Velados Pater, when it comes to the Dmei Velados, certainly Pater in this case, even though the injury happened after the husband died, there is no payment in terms of the Dmei Valdos. V'hadatanya Chayev, and the brisa which says Chayev, what is that talking about? B'Shvach Valdos, that's talking about what we identified on the previous Amud, what we call Shvach Valdos, which is the increase in value to the woman because she's a little bit larger, so that we said she actually is entitled to, according to Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. It follows Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, who said that she actually gets a portion of that. She divides that with the husband, and in this case again she's alive, so she's able to get that payment of what we call the Shevach Valdas, and that could be what the Brisa means when it says Chayiv, and that's how Rav Chisda can understand that Brisa. But the Gemara says, Ir Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, but if you're going to say that Brisa follows Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, why does the case have to be after the death of the husband, that we're talking after the death of the husband that she's able to collect? Even let's say the husband is alive, she gets half of that payment. That's what we said in the previous Amud, that when it comes to the Shvach Vladas, she's actually entitled to it. And the Gemara says, no, Mechayim Isla Palga. When the husband is alive, so she gets half of that payment. We said that she just divides that payment because the fact that she's worth more because she's a little larger, that's a little bit due to the fact that she's pregnant, it's a little bit due to the husband, but it's also a little bit due to her own body, and that's why she divides it in that case. But la'achar misa kule, but the point of the Bryce over here is that let's say the husband dies, after the husband dies, she's actually entitled to that entire payment in terms of the Shevach Valdas. And the Gemara continues, V'bay same, if you want, I could say another answer in terms of explaining these Bryces. Havahar of Shimon Gamliel, you actually can say that both Bryces follow Shimon Gamliel, kan b'Shevach Valdas, kan b'Dmei Valdas. In one case we're talking about the Shevach. The Shevach, again, that goes to her, that's why we say Chayiv. And the other Bryce is talking about the Dmei Valdas, the value of the offspring itself, and that again, according to Rav Chisda will understand the Bryce is saying Pater, because you don't pay anything at all in that case, because the woman is not entitled to that at all, and again, in this case, the husband has already died. But the Gemara continues and questions this answer. Amri, the sages, they said as follows, Mishevach Vladas, from the fact that by the Shevach of the Vlad, what are we saying according to Rav Shimon ben Gamliel by the Shvach? We're saying that normally she splits it, but now that the husband has died, she gets the whole thing. So Lishma Dmei Valdas, we should say the same thing when it comes to Dmei Valdas. If that's true by the Shevach, that normally she only gets half, and now we're going to say that she gets the entire thing. So by the Dmei Valdas also, normally it goes to the husband. Now she should get it. Why are we saying she doesn't get that? And furthermore, says the Gemara, Mid Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, and from the fact that that's true, according to Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, we're saying within Rav Shimon ben Gamliel that she gets the entire Shvach, and therefore she should get the entire Dmei Valdas. So Lishma Rabbanan, that should be true according to the Rabbanan as well, meaning to say Rav Shimon ben Gamliel and the Rabbanan, they only have a dispute in terms of the Shevach. In terms of the Dmei Valdas, there is no dispute. So if we're going to say according to Rav Shimon ben Gamliel that she gets the entire Shevach, then we should say that she also gets the Dmei Valdas, and then we should say according to the Rabbanan also that she gets the Dmei Valdas. Why then are we making a distinction? The Gemara is essentially asking between the Shevach Valdas and the Dmei Valdas, and the Gemara says to that we still can make a distinction. Amri, they answer as follows: Lo, no, Shevach Valdas to Shaycha Yoda Begavayu. When it comes to the Shevach where she already has a portion of it, she's already going to collect a portion of it anyway. So Zachyu Bubakulu. So then, if the husband dies, she actually gets the entire thing. It makes sense by something which she does get to collect a portion of it, she'll get the entire thing if the husband is no longer alive. But the Dmei Valdas, when it comes to the Dmei Valdas, the Lo Shaycha Yoda Begavayu, where really she gets nothing over there, it belongs entirely to the husband. So then, if the husband dies, Lo Zachyu Bu Klal. So then, if the husband dies, she doesn't get any of it at all. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. Boy minei Rav Yeva Saba me Rav Nachman. Rav Yeva Saba asked Rav Nachman the following question: Hamachzik b'shtaros of shel ger. Let's say somebody takes possession of the documents of a ger. The case over here is that the ger had a shtar, and the shtar entitled him to collect from some property because now there's a lien on property because he was owed some money from some people who were in debt to him. The ger over here was the creditor in this case, and so now the ger died. The ger has no heirs, and somebody comes along and takes possession of the ger's documents. So the Gemara now asks, Mahu, what exactly is the halacha? Man de machzik b'shtar, a person who takes possession of a shtar, adaite de'aru de machzik, he's really taking it not because he wants the piece of paper, he's taking it because he wants to get that lien on that property, he wants to eventually collect that property that the ger was going to be entitled to collect had he still been alive. Uviyara halo achzik, and now in terms of the land itself, he's not taking any possession. Ushtara nami lo kanen, therefore he doesn't even acquire the shtar as a piece of paper. To lav daite ashtar, because he's not having in mind to acquire the piece of paper, he's really trying by grabbing grabbing the piece of paper, he's thinking he can get that property, which he's not going to get because he's not taking possession of any property. And then the point is, the first side of the question is maybe he doesn't even get the piece of paper. Oh, Dilmar, maybe Daitinami Ashtara, maybe the person who's taking possession of the shtar is thinking, I'm trying to get the land, but I'm also trying to get the piece of paper, and therefore he should at least acquire the piece of paper. That's the question that Rav Yeva Saba asked Rav Nachman. So Amar Lei, so he said back to him, what kind of ridiculous question is this? Ani Mori, he said, answer me, my master. What he needs this piece of paper because he needs to use it to cover his flask. The person doesn't even need the piece of paper. Why are we discussing whether he acquires the piece of paper or not? So Amar Lei, so he said back to him, Lotzer v'Lotzer, no, that's exactly the case. He wants it in order to cover up his flask. He wants the piece of paper, and that's why I'm asking the question, does he actually acquire the piece of paper or not? And the Gemara continues, Amar Rabba says, Mashkono shel Yisrael, let's say you have a collateral that belongs to a Jew, Biyad Ger, and the Ger is in possession of the collateral because the Ger was owed money by the Jew, so he took a collateral from the Jew. Umeis Ger, and then the Ger dies, and so now this collateral, people are trying to get the collateral. Uba Yisrael Acher v'hechzik bo, and some other Jew comes along and tries to take possession of the collateral. Motziano so miyada, we take it away from that other Jew and we give it to the original Jew who really owns the collateral. My time, what's the reason? Kavan de Mace, because once the Ger dies, Kavan de Mace le Ger, once the Ger dies, Pakale Shibude, so his entire lien on the property, it goes away, and therefore it's essentially the collateral goes back to its original owner. And the Gemara continues with the reverse kind of case. Mashkono shel ger, let's say it's the collateral of the ger, biyad Yisrael, and the Yisrael now has taken the collateral because the Yisrael is owed money from the ger. Umeis hager, and then the ger dies. Uba Yisrael acher v'echzebo, and now another Jew comes along and tries to take that collateral. This actually is a property of the ger. He tries to get it. So zek kana keneged ma'osav. So what happens is the Jew that's owed money from the ger, he's going to acquire the collateral in as much as it's worth whatever he was owed. So let's say the collateral was worth $100, but the Jew was only owed from the ger $50, he'll get $50 of the collateral. V'zeh kanes hashar, and the other one will get the other $50. The other one who tried to take possession, this other Jew who had nothing to do with the case between the Yisrael and the ger, but he's coming along and essentially taking what is ownerless because the ger died, he'll take the rest of the collateral. But the Gemara says, V'yamai, but why should that be the case? Tikni le chatzer, why don't we say that the chatzer, the courtyard of the person who's owed the money from the ger, and that person who's in possession, it's in his courtyard, the collateral is in his courtyard should acquire the entire collateral. Why is somebody else even able to come along and get it? That first person who's owed the money from the ger, who took the collateral in the first place, it's in his chatzer, he should get the whole thing. He's the first one to acquire it. Because Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina said, that the courtyard of a person can acquire things from even without his knowledge, and therefore the person should have made the kinyan through his chatzer. And the Gemara says, Amri, the answer is as follows. And here what is the case? Delese, that he's not actually near the collateral. If you have a situation where if the person is nearby and if he wanted to make a kinyan himself, he could, so then we say that chatzero also, his chatzer also acquires for him. But if he's not around, that if he wanted to make a kinyan, he wouldn't be able to do it himself, so then chatzero nami lo kanya. So then if he's not present to theoretically make the kinyan, we don't say that his chatzer is kona without his das, and that's why another person is able to come in and get part of this collateral. And Rashi explains delese, meaning again, she'ein hamalva ba'ir, if the malva is not in the city, so he himself could not make the kinyan, therefore the chatzer is not going to be kona on his behalf. But the Gemara concludes, v'hilchasa, but the halacha is delese bechatzero delo kona, that the item is not in the chatzer, and only in that situation the chatzer is kona, otherwise the chatzer would be kona. Rashi over here explains, v'hilchasa, the halacha actually is, hada aminon zeh kones ashar, when we say that the other person is able to acquire the rest of the collateral, and we say that the chatzer is not kona, that entire collateral, b'delese lemashkon b'chatzer shel malva, the way Rashi understands is that really it's talking about a case where the mashkon is not in the courtyard of the malva, b'shas misa sager, at the time that the ger dies, avol isei lemashkon b'chatzero, but Rashi understands the Gemara to mean, if the mashkon is in his chatzer, kani lechatzer, then his chatzer actually would acquire the entire mashkon, and another person would not be able to be kona the rest of the mashkon. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Hachofer bor b'rishas hayachid upischol l'rishas harabim. If somebody digs a pit in rishas hayachid and its opening is in rishas harabim, o b'rishas harabim upischol l'rishas hayachid, or if he digs the pit in rishas harabim and its opening is in rishas hayachid, b'rishas hayachid upischol l'rishas hayachid acher, or if he digs it in rishas hayachid and the opening is in a different rishas hayachid, chayiv. In all of these cases, the person is chayiv. And Rashi explains upischol l'rishas harabim, if the opening is in rishas harabim, that's the first case of the Mishnah. V'kol shekenim chafer b'rishas harabim upischol l'rishas harabim. Rashi points out, certainly if he dug it in Rosh Hashanah and the opening is in Rosh Hashanah, certainly chayiv in that case. V'lo teima dafka chofer b'reshusei dahavale bor de'islei bailam, and don't say that only if he digs it in his reshus where it's a pit that has an owner. Aval chofer b'Rosh Hashanah potter, but if it's in Rosh Hashanah potter, don't say that. Ta'atani seifa chofer bor b'Rosh Hashanah v'nafal asocha, because it's going to say in the seifa again, if somebody digs a pit in Rosh Hashanah, certainly he is going to be chayiv. B'Rosh Hashanah upischol Rosh Hashanah. Now let's say it's the other way around. Let's say he digs the pit in Rosh Hashanah with the opening in Rosh Hashanah, to have a bor b'Rosh Hashanah. There, the bor actually is in Rosh Hashanah. V'hifger reshuso. Now, the point over here is he makes his property hefker. He allows people to enter into his property. The lo motzi l'meimer by bois b'reshusei. He can no longer say, "What are you doing in my property?" He's allowing people into his property. V'nafal derech piv l'soch. When again the person falls through the opening into the pit. So chayiv. So in this case also, in all of these cases chayiv to kasaver. The point over here is that the Mishnah, the author of the Mishnah holds chiyuva de bor bein b'rishas harabim bein b'rishas hayachid. The chiyuv of bor is both in rishas harabim and in rishas hayachid. It's in both. Uvilvad sheyafke rishus. So again, as Rashi noted, it's only going to be in rishas hayachid if the person made his area, made his rishas hefker. B'rishas hayachid upischol rishas hayachid. Let's say it was in rishas hayachid, opens to a different rishas hayachid. Afagav de ein kan sad rishas harabim. Even though there is no rishas harabim here whatsoever, chayev he is chayev. Uvilvad im hifke rishuso osa shapia bor l'socha. Again, it has to be where the area where the opening of the pit is. That area has to be hefker. It has to be an area where people are allowed to walk. And then again, in that situation, we're going to say that the person is chayiv. And the Gemara says, Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Hachofer bor b'rishas hayachid. If somebody digs a pit in rishas hayachid, upischo l'rishas harabim, and the opening is to rishas harabim, and the parentheses say b'rishas harabim upischo l'rishas hayachid. If he digs in rishas harabim with the opening in rishas hayachid, chayiv, he's going to be chayiv. And the Mesoras Hashah says that the parentheses should be taken out. So we're talking specifically about a case again where the opening is in rishas harabim. V'zehu bor ha'amr b'Torah, and this is the bor that is discussed in the Torah. Divrei Rabbi Yishmael. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yishmael. And Rashi explains, upischol rishas harabim, again, the opening is rishas harabim, kevon shahata kola b'rishas harabim. The point is, according to Rabbi Yishmael, according to the Tanna Kamma over here, since the obstacle is in rishas harabim, havalei kamisha chafer b'rishas harabim, it's considered to be dug in rishas harabim, v'zehu bor lekamim afarish mai zehu. The Gemara will explain, what does it mean that this is the pit that is discussed in the Torah? And the Brisa continues, Rabbi Akiva says, hifker rishuso v'lo hifker boro. Actually, in a situation where it's in his rishus, and he makes his rishus ownerless, he allows people into his rishus, but he doesn't make the bor itself ownerless. Zeu bor ha'amar b'Torah. That's actually the case of bor that is written in the Torah. And the Gemara says, Amar Rabba says, but bor b'rishas harabim kuliyal malo pligi demechayiv. Everybody agrees that if there's a bor in rishas harabim, everybody agrees chayiv in that case. My time, what's the reason? Amar Kra, because the pasuk says ki yiftach v'chiyichra. It talks about opening a pit and it talks about digging a pit. Im al psicha chayiv al kriya lo kol shekain. If you're chayiv on opening a pit, certainly you'd be chayiv on digging the pit. Ela shal iske psicha v'al iske kriya balo. What it means really is that it's because of the opening, because of the digging. That's why the person is responsible. And that applies specifically in a bor b'rishas harabim. Lo nechleku ella, the only machlokas between Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Akiva is in the following case. And Rashi explains, Kuliyamalo pligi de mechayiv. Everybody agrees that the person is chayiv again in a bor b'rishas harabim. The point is, Rabbi Akiva modelei Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Akiva certainly admits to Rabbi Yishmael, but bor b'rishas harabim, by a bor in rishas harabim, that the person is chayiv. To who amr b'Torah. That is the case that's said in the Torah. Aval Rabbi Yishmael lo modelei Rabbi Akiva. The point is, Rabbi Yishmael does not agree with Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva agrees with Rabbi Yishmael that a bor b'rishas harabim is the case of bor in the Torah, but Rabbi Yishmael does not agree with Rabbi Akiva, but bor b'rishuso, by a bor that's dug in his own property, that is a case of the Torah. To kasaver, because he holds ki afkarna lach rishusi, when I made my property hefker, lav lach yuve ana behezek afkarte. I didn't do that in order to be chayiv in damages. In other words, if a person is generous, so to speak, and allows people to go through his property, he didn't do that in order to be chayiv in case the person gets damaged. That again, that's the opinion of Rabbi Yishmael, and that's Rabbi Yishmael says the person is not chayiv by a bor b'rishuso. And the Gemara then continued. Rashi explains the mal poseach. Again, the Gemara said if you're chayiv on opening a pit, certainly on digging a pit. Shechafro acher v'chiso, if someone else dug it, it was covered up. U'ba'acher v'gileu, and then he opened it up. So you're uncovering a pit versus digging a pit. Again, if you're chayiv for uncovering, certainly you'd be chayiv for digging. Why does it say both? And the idea is that it's al iskei psicha al iskei kriya ba'lo. It's through the opening and through the digging that the person is responsible. The point is, she'ein lo chelik, but we're talking about something which is in Rosh Hashanah. He has no ownership of it at all. El shakaro shapaschu, he just dug it or he opened it. The hainu b'Rosh Hashanah, meaning to say a bor b'Rosh Hashanah, she'ein hakarka shalo, that the land does not belong to him. That's certainly what the pasuk is talking about, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Nun Amud Aleph.